Okay, I think I'm ready to go. Welcome back, everyone.
I think what I'm needing is, here's what I need to do.
Welcome back, everyone, after a wonderful lunch. People have been asking me about accessing these talks later. You may have noticed our very fancy boom and equipment here. Geth and Edward asked me where ACA got the huge budget for this fancy equipment. Anyway, we are live streaming, and the videos should be available on YouTube after, so on our Anglican Communion Alliance channel. So feel free to check that out or share it. So we are going to begin this afternoon with a presentation by Julie Moser, and Julie was the main person that I talked to about organizing something where ACA and Engage can work together. That was actually her initiative. And so I really appreciate that. She's been down with the Engage, she's been over with the Engage group, as well as along with Stephen and her husband Ken, leading over there, and I've been hearing really good things about the sessions this morning. So as part of our ACA sessions, we wanted to hear from them as well. So Julie's going to speak to us. I first got to know her this past winter when she contacted me to see if we could work together on something. We realized that her work as youth missionary in Diocese of Capel and my work with ACA, through those things we have many goals in common, especially when it comes to deepening biblical faith in the Anglican Church of Canada, because she focuses on discipleship of youth. I then interviewed her for the Anglican Planet, which I also work with. It was a very popular Q&A. Check it out online if you haven't read it yet. Julie is a dynamic person, full of energy, full of love for Jesus, and full of love for his church, with a special focus on young people. Julie is Australian. Probably don't have to tell you that if you spoke to her. She moved to Canada 15 years ago, though. She says she has developed a taste for poutine, so she expects to be accepted as a citizen in the coming year. Julie is married to Ken, who's the professor of youth ministry at Briarcrest College, and Ken is one of the speakers for the Engage sessions. Julie has been in youth ministry in the Anglican Church for about 30 years as a church-based youth minister, as well as a diocesan advisor in Sydney, and now in the Diocese of Capel.
Yay! Thanks, Julie.
Julie is passionate about helping young people in knowing the Lord by equipping them with a firm foundation in scriptures. And she is passionate about training most of us who are not quite that young to help in discipling them. So I'd like to invite Julie.
Thank you. And I might get you, Sharon, to give me a wave when I'm running out of time.
Okay.
It's really, I'm very excited about this day for us, the partnership of ACA, Anglican Communion Alliance, and youth ministry, and to be thinking about this in our churches. And so what I'm going to do is give you a snapshot or summary of what we're actually doing for the whole day in our sessions up in the where some. It's very hard to find. Anyway, now let me just say, I hope that you can understand me, even with my accent. You know that when I go home to Australia, my friends tell me that I've totally lost my accent, and I just sound like a Canadian, and they just can't believe how much I've lost my accent. And so I'm not sure what that's about, but yeah, I think they find trying to understand me now. It's kind of strange. I also find myself saying something I never thought I would say. It's not that cold. I said that to our guest from Texas, like, actually, this is not that cold. I thought, gosh, I remember people saying that to me when we moved to Canada. So I want to kick off. Now, I also want to apologise that if you've heard me speak before, I have a bit of a broken record. And so Dale here, who's also from the Diocese of Capel, will have heard me say the same things over and over. So if you've heard me before, I hope that it's refreshing for you rather than tedious. But I will be saying some of the things I said at the provincial synod and some other things.
Preach it, sister. 34 times.
Thank you, Dale. I want to kick off with some famous last words that people have spoken throughout history that I think are quite interesting. The first one is from a guy called Voltaire. He's a French Enlightenment writer, and he on his deathbed, he was asked to renounce Satan. And this is how he replied, and this is his last words. Now is not the time to be making new enemies. I'm not confident about him. Mexican revolutionary General Pancho Villa. He's dying on the battlefield, and things haven't gone so well. And so he's surrounded by his military, and he says this: "Don't let it end like this. Tell them I said something." I don't think he was surrounded by friends. But my favourite final last words are by any redneck, and it goes like this: "Hold my beer and watch this." Now, we hear these famous last words and we think, oh my goodness, I don't have famous last words like that. We hear these last words, we kind of chuckle at them because we know that the last words that someone speaks to us are often the most important. It's a thing that they want us to remember before they leave, before they say goodbye. So as you were coming here to this conference, you said last words to your family. I love you, and, feed the dog, take the garbage out, all that sort of stuff. But your last words are the most important. And so as we gather together and we think as God's people, what were the last words of Jesus to us before his ascension? And I'm going to read them to you. Very famous last words as this: "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you." Jesus' last words to us: go and make disciples. Now, I want to jump back into our Old Testament, into the book of Judges. And I just realised I've got to click up on them. The book of Judges, you've got God's people have come out of Egypt. They've gone into the promised land under Joshua, and now they're in the promised land. And it's the time of the judges. And here's how the book of Judges begins. In chapter 2, there's this verse. Oh, sorry, I forgot all about that. Don't worry about it. The last words, the words in the book of Joshua, chapter 2, are this: "After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done for Israel." Now I want you to think about that. Who were the parents of these people? The parents of these people, as children, had seen the Passover, the plagues of Egypt. They saw the parting of the Red Sea. They saw God's rescue. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They watched all of their parents die in the wilderness. They go into the promised land. They see Joshua, the walls of Jericho come down. Think about all the things that these guys' parents saw. And what is the next generation? They neither knew the Lord or what he had done for his people. How on earth does that happen? How do those parents not tell their kids what the Lord has done for his people? This is the situation in our culture, in our churches, and it's not just Anglicans. People are afraid to talk about their faith. And if you talk to a parent, they'll say, look, I just want my children to decide. I just let them decide. But they don't let them decide when to go to bed. And they don't let them decide whether they're going to do homework. And they don't let them decide, what vegetables they're going to eat at the dinner table. But when it comes to spiritual things, oh well, we don't want to be involved with that, and we let them decide. And Canada used to be a very Christian country. And not that long ago, Canada was very Christian. And in a very short space of time, a generation and a half, Canada went from very Christian to very secular. Because what happened in the book of Judges has happened here. We've known who the Lord is, and we've known what he's done for us, and how he sent his son to die on the cross. And we're so afraid to pass that on. We're so afraid to offend, and we're so afraid that we will turn people off something that we haven't even turned them on to in the first place. Now, I want to show you a video. I'm really hoping this works. You never know with technology, but I want to show you a video of a young woman. Her name is Jill, and she's in the Diocese of Capel. And Jill is someone who had an older person step into her life and open the scriptures with her and spend time with her and disciple her. And this is just a 2-minute video that tells us her experience of having this older person step into her life. So we can fade the sound up, and I think I'm not really hoping this is going to work.
My name is Jill, and I've been meeting with an older lady in my community for about 3 years now. And what we do is every week we get together and just over coffee, and we'll talk about life, things that are going on for me, and then we'll read through a portion of the Bible, and then we just pray to close off our meetings. And it's really simple, it's no pressure, but it's been incredibly helpful for me. Mostly because, well, for one, it's really nice to have an older person genuinely take an interest in your life, but it's also been so enriching for me to have somebody who's had more life experience than I have, to be able to just act either as a sounding board or to offer advice from her own experience and just help me figure out my life. She works as a really good source of accountability for me. So there's certain disciplines in my spiritual life that I wanted to have in place, and it's more helpful to have somebody who's going to actually ask you about those things than if I were to just do that on my own. The other thing with her though is that I don't feel like she's somebody that I need to keep happy, that like I'm going to let down, but somebody that I know it's really beneficial for me to be completely honest with. And I don't feel like there's any strings attached. It's such a meaningful relationship to me now. And at first, when I first started, I was like, okay, I don't know how this is gonna go. I don't know if she's gonna care, but like right off the bat, all she did was really try to make me feel aware that she cares and that it's a safe environment. And that in itself, to me, is what I think being part of the church body is supposed to be about. Like just coming together and sharing our experiences that we have and working together to figure out what it means to live in the church and as a Christian in this life. Yeah.
Okay, I hope the sound was okay for you, that you heard what she said. Here's this young woman. Now, just so you know, Jill is now, she's grown up, she's got married, and she's now in her church discipling a little group of girls. And so just really great to see her go on to do the same thing for another group. But you hear how she talks about, this older woman comes along, she's not sure how this is going to go, she's not sure if this person's going to care for her, but how it's really blessed her in her faith. And I love when she says, I think this is actually what the church is all about. That coming together and helping each other in the Christian faith. Now, I want you hear that story and you go, that's just wonderful. That's just so great, with Jill and how she's doing it. Here's the thing. There are a lot of Jills. There are a lot of Jills out there, and Jims and everyone who are not being discipled. And here's the thing. I will say, okay, I can disciple this girl and this girl and this girl, but somebody can disciple this guy and this guy and that girl. And so I go to other adults in the Anglican churches and I say, here's a young person who needs someone to disciple. Will you do it? And what do they say? They say, oh, no. No. I could not do that. Now, here's where I want your involvement. I want you to tell me what you think are the reasons. There's actually a few different reasons that I get. What are the reasons that people say, I couldn't do what the person did with Jill, I couldn't do that? Too busy, yes. And I said it earlier in our engaged session, I think that's actually the saddest of all. We are saying to our young people, we are too busy to pass on the faith to you. We are too busy for you. And young people know that adults are too busy for them. And 20 years ago, when Ken and I got married and we started working in church, and that whole I'm busy thing started to really pop up. You'd say, how are you doing? I'm really busy. I remember when that transition happened from I'm doing well to I'm really busy. And we made a decision back then, we are never going to use that word. We are never going to say that we're busy. Because when I say to you, I'm so busy, you're not going to say, well, let's go and have coffee. Let's go do something together. You're going to say, okay, fine, you're too busy. And busyness destroys relationship. And we actually have to get rid of that. The Christian part of our culture, who we are, needs to say to the rest of our culture, we are not too busy for the most important things. And then Jesus saying to the disciples, go and make disciples. Well, Jesus, we're going to be really busy. There's only 12 of us. There's lots of stuff. We've got to set up whole structures and all sorts of stuff we've got to do. Imagine if they said to Jesus, I'm too busy to do what you just told me to do. And yet in our churches and in our lives, we've structured our lives so that we are too busy. We don't make time for each other. Okay, that's unfortunately it's a key one in our society. But what else? Why else won't people take someone else's side and disciple them? Unqualified, yes. I don't know enough. I don't have a seminary degree, and I'm not a bishop. I can't do this. This is really complicated. I don't have the skill set and to do this. That's a huge thing. Now, it's okay to be sober about ourselves and say, okay, yeah, I don't know everything, and I'm not the world's expert in, Hebrew and Greek. But we do have to be able to say, Christ has done something in our life. We know the message of the gospel. We know what Christ has done for us on the cross. And we can actually open our Bibles and read them. So we don't have to be rocket scientists to do this. And a lot of the time, it's just muddling our way through. When I first started in youth ministry, I was in my early 20s, and I did not know what I was doing. And I look back at all the things I did wrong, and I think, I can't believe that, and said this and said that. But it's kind of like ice skating. The first time you get on ice skates, you're not ready for the Olympics. But you keep going. You keep giving it a go. And that's what makes us good at it. So you just got to get started and say, you know what? I know how to talk to someone. I know how to show interest in them. I know how to open up the Bible and read it. And I know how to pray. I can do that. Any other reasons that you want to throw out there? I've got one more I want to add to us. Oh, let me just add one thing about the busyness. Young woman I saw last summer at a wedding. We'd met years before. I'd discipled her. And she'd actually approached me to say, will you disciple me? And she said to me at this wedding just last year, she's now gone on to be discipling other girls, it's fantastic. She said, when I first approached you
and asked if you would disciple me. I was really nervous to ask you. She said, because I'd rather ask for people's money than their time. People think time is so precious that we recognise that when we say no, it's giving up the most precious. When we actually say yes to someone, giving up the most precious thing is our time. Now, someone down back, yeah.
I don't get along well with kids.
Okay, I don't get along well with kids. You know what? That's actually okay as well. I don't expect everyone to be passionate about teenagers. I'm not passionate about 6-year-olds. Like, I get terrified of the idea of, do the children's nursery, you're kidding me. So I don't expect everyone to be an expert in young people. But a lot of us have situations where we've raised kids, we have grandchildren, we have nieces and nephews, we have people in our life who are the age group that we're talking about. So it doesn't have to be you're the member of the youth group and that you're picking up people in your church to do it. So I'd like people to do that. There are a lot of opportunities. There was a church in Saskatchewan I went to visit and speak at. And they said, it's really nice that, the youth and children's person has come to speak to us, but look at us. There's, a dozen of us, and we're all old, and we don't have a priest, and there's not a lot going on here, and so we can't do anything with youth and children. I said, well, let's count how many grandchildren are represented around this table. There's like 26 grandchildren represented by this group of older Anglicans. So right away, you've got a group of people that God has put in your lap who love you and love seeing you and want to spend time with you. So you might not be good with kids, but there are going to be people that God has put in your life that He's made you responsible for specifically. So, okay, I'm going to give us one more before we move on, and that is, and this is, I think, the common experience of the average Anglican. No one discipled me, so I have no idea how to disciple someone else. No one did this for me. I just grew up Anglican. I just am what I am. And so when I say disciple someone, help them along the way, it's a new concept for a lot of people. It's, wow, you're asking me to do something so complicated, and I have no idea what you're actually describing. Now, I think when we look at a situation where we say, okay, Jesus' last words, go make disciples. But we haven't been discipled, we don't actually know, we've kind of missed this last couple of generations, we've kind of skipped a step and we've lost that gift. So what do? Well, the obvious thing to do is we go to the scriptures and say, well, what does the Bible tell us to do with this? What can it teach us on how to disciple someone? So this is the next slide up here. I'm not expecting you to be able to read that because I can't read that. So, but here's a whole lot of Bible passages. In our Engage session, what we did is we read all of these Bible passages and we said, what did Paul do with Timothy that we can do with someone else? Because he obviously got it right with Timothy and others. So what did Paul do and how can we do the same thing? And I want to just point out a few things. The passages, I'm sorry, this is kind of the condensed Engage training. So the passages are there for you to glance at it if you're able to see them. But here's the things that we've pulled out of these passages. First of all, Paul taught the scriptures. He taught the scriptures. And that is actually the key part of all of this. If we think that we are going to be discipling someone without the scriptures, it's really not going to work. And I have asked people, will you disciple someone? And they go off and they teach them how to cook, and they teach them how to fix a car, and they teach them all these things. And I think, that's nice, but that's not discipleship, that's mentoring. Mentoring is equipping someone with a skill that you have and passing that skill on. Discipling is a whole way of life, and it's all about following Jesus. So the scriptures are important. So when we get together in Starbucks or wherever, the Bible is open. And for me, discipling girls, it's very easy just to spend the whole time talking and all sorts of stuff and to not open the scriptures, but the scriptures are the key. If we want the kids to know who the Lord is and what He's done for them, the scriptures have to be open. Secondly, we need to teach in the context of relationship. So I don't just meet at a coffee shop with the young person and give them the Bible study and say, see you next week. I want to know how their week has been. How is it at home? How is it at school? What's going on for you? I care about you and I want to know what's going on for you. The third thing, and this is something that happens in not just Anglican churches but everywhere, is we don't overlook people from strong Christian backgrounds. So if you know the story of Timothy, Timothy did not become a Christian through the Apostle Paul. Timothy had a Christian grandmother, and Timothy had a Christian mom. And he was raised by his grandmother and his mother to hear about the Lord. And they did such a good job that when Paul came to the town where Timothy lived, all the believers said to Paul, have you met Timothy? He is the most outstanding young man. You have to meet Timothy. And Paul, as we know, meets Timothy and then takes him on his missionary journeys. And so here we've got this great work that Lois and Eunice, his mother and grandmother, did for him. And Paul even acknowledges his grandmother and mother in the first book of Timothy. And he says, I didn't start the work with Timothy. I built on the foundation that was built in the home. And again, going back to, well, I'm not good with kids, our homes need to be the starting point for all of this. And as Anglicans, our prayer book acknowledges that. There is prayers for the families, prayer times that you can do as a family. But you talk to the average home, who is having devotions after dinner? Who is actually opening up and saying prayers? Who is doing these things? Hardly anyone is. And it's really un-Anglican to not be doing this with our kids and grandkids. If we really are seriously, we are Anglican, then we should be doing this in our homes. The other thing about that whole thing is, when it comes to dealing with youth in the church, quite often the kid from the strong Christian home is overlooked. We go, well, that's the minister's kid. He's fine. That's the elder's daughter. She's fine. That's the kid that serves at the altar. He's fine. So as long as, we think something's happening, we don't need to invest in them. But Paul didn't make that mistake. He saw a quality young man and he thought, this is the young man I need to build on the work of his family and invest in. A few other things, there's a pattern of imitation. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11:1, imitate me as I imitate Christ. So we need to be people who can be imitated. We need to be people who do pray and do read our Bible and are committed to the body of believers. And we need to be able to set that example for the people we disciple. We need to minister. Sometimes we do ministry with a person we disciple, like Paul and Timothy, and the end result of discipleship might be that they go on to disciple others. And that's actually how the Christian church works. It's we have the gospel, we pass it on to the next generation, they have the gospel, they pass it on to the next generation, and it keeps going. And unless we do, it doesn't keep going, like in the book of Judges. Okay, so I'm going to condense it down too. Let me just see if I've got the next slide. Okay, here's all the points I just made. I'm really hopeless with this stuff. I get kind of involved in what I'm saying. Okay, here's what we do when we meet with someone. We just do these three things. It's really easy. You say, let's meet at Starbucks on Thursday afternoon. We're going to talk. How are you doing? What's going on? Talk about your life. We're going to study. We're going to open the scriptures. We're going to read the Bible together. And if you're not confident in your own knowledge, there's lots of great resources out there that you can use. So I use Bible study booklets with young people and go through a booklet. And then you finish by praying. It's really easy. And, I say to people, you disciple someone, they go, no, I couldn't do that. Well, okay, well, would you be able to just, have a cup of tea with them and talk to them and read the Bible with them and say prayer with them? Oh, I think I could probably do that. I think that's probably something I could do. And so I've tricked many people into discipleship, not knowing that that's what they were actually doing. But here's the simple thing that Paul models for us. And we need to be thinking, okay, who am I doing this with? Who am I doing this with? Now, I want to go through a few stories with you about. I'm not going to do so much the training with you as much as I'm going to kind of give you a picture of discipleship. So then I want to give you a few stories of people who have done this, and I want to start with a video of a guy called Luke, who is also in our diocese, and his story about when he was first approached and asked, will you be involved with young people in discipleship? Now let's just see, okay, I'm going to just see if this works. You might have to, and the sound will go up a bit as well.
My name is Luke Johnson. For the past 2.5 years, I've been working with some of the young people in my church. We meet roughly 10 months out of the year, once a week. And a lot of our time together is spent reading scripture and thinking together, what does it mean for us? We spend time praying and learning how to pray. And we just spend some time in community, building our relationships with one another. This isn't an opportunity that I went looking for. It just came out of church life. I was approached by a few people from my church. They asked me if I'd be willing to actively disciple some of the young people in my parish. It's not something I thought I'd be doing, honestly. I am an introvert, so the thought of spending time with young people every week was a little overwhelming, thinking, how am I going to relate to people that are, in some cases, decades younger than me? Do we even speak the same language? But it turns out that young people can smell care under layers of
To me, is a great someone who just said, you know what, this has come out of church life, this need, I've been asked, it's really kind of surprising that I've been asked, but you know what, I'm going to give it a go. And Luke, he's still doing it, and this is, he's been doing it for 5 years now. It's just fantastic what he's been doing with his young people, discipling these young people. And he says his personality was not, to be the young, hip, cool youth minister, but he and the young people love Luke. You see these young people with Luke, they just love him and love spending time with him because they know he cares about them. Now, when I first moved to Canada, we moved to Vancouver. I thought I was going to die from the cold in Vancouver. So cold. And people would talk about the prairies, which the freezer goes to -18, so how is it even possible that you live in an environment that goes below the freezer? Anyway, I've worked that one out. But in our time in Vancouver, I had a group of girls and I was discipling. And it was going very well. I needed a bit of help. So there's this other woman in our church, really wonderful, godly woman, who I just thought, this woman is worthy of imitation. So I went up to this woman, Anita, and she was close to 60, and I was in my late 30s. And I said, Anita, would you help me disciple these young girls? And she said, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm too old to do that. I'm too old. And I said, Anita, they can't tell the difference between you and me. I'm like 30s old, 60s old, 25 old. So she reluctantly agreed to do it. So she helped me, she came to the first time we gathered together. She came and she really liked doing the study together with the girls. And at the end of the study, she said to the girls, when Julie asked me this, I was kind of surprised that she asked me to do this. And I thought, you're not going to want me here because I'm so old. And the girl said to her, but Julie's old. section we didn't even see. And here's the thing, I was a youth minister and then we left. And youth ministers leave, but the parishioners don't leave. And so Anita was able to stay in the lives of these young women after I had left. And while I can still, have contact with these young people from a distance, Anita's in their life. And every time, it's incredible, every time I would go back to Vancouver, I'd see Anita, who was such a special woman. And she would say to me all the time, thank you so much for asking me to do this. It was such a wonderful blessing to me to be able to be involved in these young girls' lives. And I am so thankful to her that she is still carrying on that. And now the girls are in their late 20s that we discipled. So it's just wonderful for her to have this relationship with them. Now, the thing that we've got to realise as older Anglicans is that young people want us to be involved with them. Young people love it when old people take an interest in them. I heard a story, I heard a comparative story today actually. There was this story about this mother who she wanted her son to go to church. She just asked and asked, a young teenage son, he wouldn't go to church, he wouldn't go. Eventually she got, eventually one day the son said, I'll go. Like it was like a miracle. She'd been praying, she'd been asking, hoping. Finally, her son, imagine how this woman felt that her teenage son walks into church with her and sits down, how she'd be feeling like that, how thankful she was feeling. Well, the first adult to come up to them was a cranky old man who told him that he shouldn't have a cap on his head in church. He was a very disrespectful young man. So you imagine, how did that mother feel? And do you think that young man came back? This is the kind of thing that it's almost like we've just thought, oh, young people's the right thing, so I didn't even have to make any effort at all. Whereas if you're someone who's saying, I really care about young people, when I go to church on Sunday and I see the son of this woman that I know, I'm going to say hello to her, and I'm going to say hello to him by name. And the past 4 years, my husband and I had our nephew live with us. And then John was not a Christian, but he said, you're going to live with us, you're going to come to church with us. And so he'd come to church with us. Now, if we'd given him the option to sleep in, he would have slept in. But I tell you, every week that we went to church, so many people, including priests, would come up and say hello to him, and they all knew his name. And he actually was quite happy being around the people in this church. And though he didn't become a Christian, he had a really good experience of his local Anglican church and the people that went there. That is a very simple thing that we can do, and that is a little step in discipleship that we can all do and that we all should do. How do we have time, Sharon?
10 more minutes?
Okay. We all need to pass on the faith. We all need to do this. Grandparents to grandchildren, aunts and uncles to nieces and nephews, godparents. What an open door that one is. Godparents to godchildren. Just dealing with the young people in our lives. We all can do this. And so we all need to actually ask ourselves, and I'd like you to ask God, Lord, is there someone that you put in my path and I just, for whatever reason, get so distracted I haven't noticed? Lord, is there someone that you want me to do this with, to take an extra interest in and to care for? And now these things, they can happen in all sorts of forms. There's a priest in our diocese, Claude, who it's really terrific. He does morning prayer in his church, and he had one person showing up, one young man showing up for morning prayer before work. So he thought, okay, I'm going to do this discipleship. So what he did was he'd do morning prayer with this guy. Then they'd go out for breakfast and they'd open up the lectionary readings that they'd read that morning and they'd talk about them and discuss the reading. And he just started to disciple this young man as a young dad and needed some direction. And he was just a really simple open door that he saw, here's how I can bring discipleship into my week. Now, any any church in any diocese can do this because you don't need a critical mass, you just need one. You don't need lots of resources, you just need a Bible. And you don't need to be young and hip and cool. You can be a grandmother armed with a cup of tea and a Bible, and you can do it. So this is not something that I'm asking people to do or to think about. That is out of the realm of possibility. This is actually really simple. And what we've got to do is ask the Lord, help us to know where to start. I want to finish with a story about an Australian speed skater called Stephen Bradbury. Now, to you, a speed skater, what's so special about that? You know, everyone skates because you go to a town in Saskatchewan that's populated by 50 people. Well, there's a big ice skating rink, and not only is there a big ice skating rink, there's an outdoor skating rink in case that's being used for a game and other people want to. Everyone skates in Canada, but in Australia, no one skates. In fact, I know of one ice skating rink in the city of Sydney of 5 million people. So it's kind of unusual. So this guy, Stephen Bradbury, he became a speed skater. Now, obviously, there was not a lot of momentum behind him to be a speed skater, but over a 10-year career, he achieved a lot. He even had 2 life-threatening accidents. He had one where he fell over and someone skated over his leg and cut the knee up his leg. So he had a really hard time with it. It was, but he persevered, and for 10 years he had this career. And in 2002, he was at the Olympics in Salt Lake City, and he knew this was really the end. This is the end of his time skating. He was getting on in years. And so he goes through the whole process, and this amazing thing happens. He makes it to the quarterfinals. That's pretty incredible for an Australian speed skater. He made it to the quarterfinals of the Olympics. And but then he came third in the next year. He came third at some point, and he got knocked out. And said, "Oh, what a shame." Then someone got disqualified, so he was back in again. So it was kind of exciting. So then he kept going until he got to the very final race. And there was 4 of them. And he was one of them. He was one of the speed skaters in the gold medal race for the Olympics. This is amazing for an Australian. So here's what he and his coach decided. Here's the strategy. I'm going to not fall down. My goal is to not fall down. Because if one of them falls down, I'll get the bronze medal. So that's what he did. He actually deliberately stayed at the back of the pack. He didn't try to get to the front. He wasn't trying to win. Stayed at the back of the pack. And he skated, and if you ever Google it and you watch it, he's skating behind everyone the entire race, couple-minute race. And just before the finish line, all the other skaters fell over. And an astonished Stephen Bradbury crossed the finish line, the gold medal winner. And it was the most incredible thing. How on earth did this Australian get the gold? This is incredible that this has happened. Of course, Australia went crazy. You know, there's an expression for a while that if you pull a rabbit out of a hat or you do something extraordinary, you pull a Bradbury. And so it was very exciting. But very shortly after the race, the criticism came, and they said he does not deserve the gold. He doesn't deserve it. He's not the best skater. He should not have the gold medal. This is what Stephen Bradbury said. Obviously, I wasn't the fastest skater. And I don't think I'll take this medal as the 1.5-minute race I actually won, but I will take it as the last decade of the hard slog that I put in. Now, for many of us, we are not the fastest. We're not the biggest church. We're not the most popular. We're not the hippest and coolest. But we need to stay standing, and we need to stay in the race. And the only way we can do that is if we pass the faith on to the next generation. We can't be the ones who say, look, let's just wait till we all die out and close the doors. We can't let that happen. We need to say, we are gonna fight and work and put in the hard slog that's needed to pass on the faith until we're done, until the Lord calls us home. And what do we want our last words to be? Well, it can't be, I gave up. I was just too hard. I was just too busy. Our last words are going to be, we've run the race, we've finished the race. And we want to hear our Lord and Savior say, well done, good and faithful servant. We've done nothing for long enough. It's time to do something. Let's get in there and have a go. Let's get in there and make some mistakes. Let's get in there and have a try. God is with us. And now I want to read you Jesus' very, very, very last words. The last thing he said before he left this earth. He said this: surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Amen.
Wow, thank you so much, Julie. I think that needs to be heard in every diocese and every church across the country. It's fantastic. Thank you. We're going to take just like a 2-minute stretch break kind of thing while I set up a few things, and then we'll get right into our next session.
I'm sure we'll have some questions. Our neighbors. Yeah.
Like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't think we will.
Yeah, okay. I'll
Take a break. I think so. Excellent.
That's why you wanted 2 minutes.
That's right.
Ah.
That's right. Okay.
Aha.
Bring it up, Helen.
Left or right?
Left,
Left, your left. That's that, right?
just looking for my.
So you want it this
Actually,
way. The wrong way.
I guess it doesn't matter left or right.
No, it just depends what you want.
I'm actually going to, I'm not going to sit.
Okay,
So I'll mention it and I'll like that.
okay.
Yeah.
A little bit angry, but you
Is that
feel
right?
comfortable that's going to stay there?
Yeah. My glasses and everything. How's that? Okay.
I'll turn you on here and then I'll turn you on in the back.
So what do I do with this?
Put it wherever you want. You put
And
your
just
belt.
leave it alone?
Yeah. You don't have to touch it.
Okay.
I turned
Can
it
I-
on so you don't have
Okay.
to touch it.
There.
Will it go in
Okay.
there?
Yeah?
Okay.
It's good. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, everyone, I think we will get started in a second here. So I'm just going to be sharing with you for a few minutes, and I apologize if I go kind of quickly. I have a lot of stuff to present, and I'm trying to edit myself as I go. And at the end of our session here, we're going to have Jean Packard, who you all know, I'm sure, help us and lead us through a prayer time at the end of that. I think of Jean as a prayer warrior and a person very much in tune with the Holy Spirit, and so he's going to help us at the end of our session. Back to my notes here. So my name is Sharon Dewey Hetke. I think I've met quite a few of you. I live in Napanee, Ontario. My husband is a priest there in Napanee. I grew up in Manitoba, and then I went to school for a while in Winnipeg and Waterloo, and then met my husband there, and he served in 2 different parishes in Saskatchewan. And then in 2010, we moved to the Diocese of Ontario in the lovely town of Napanee. About a year ago, May, I guess it was, I was appointed National Director of Anglican Communion Alliance. So that's how I come to be here today. I was here a year ago in the Diocese of Calgary, and I worshiped here on Sunday morning with Sheila and Alan. And I remember thinking, this is just a great place, and we have to do something here. And Sheila and I talked about that, and here we are. Thanks in large part to Sheila's willingness to help with so many details, which was just great. And it's wonderful to see folks from the Diocese of Saskatchewan. Some of them have just had to leave to catch their plane if they were here, and Saskatoon, and Athabasca, and Capel, as well as, of course, the lovely people, the Diocese of Calgary. Have I missed any dioceses? I think I covered everyone. It's so great to come together to learn and to pray and to be encouraged, and to hear from Dr. Kidd and Julie. And it was so wonderful to hear those talks. And thanks again to Chris Dow and Geth and Edward for helping to lead in worship. That was kind of last minute. Some of you know that I lost my father 2 weeks ago. So that had an impact on my planning for this. But whenever I asked for help, people just said yes. And I'm so thankful for that. It was really, really wonderful. And thanks to Jean, who also said yes when I asked him to help with this session. I want to do 5 things together. See, I have never used one of these things before. There we are. It works. 5 things together this afternoon. We will not be putting a lot of focus on the theological and biblical exploration of the issue of same-sex marriage. Many of you are well versed in those topics, and Dr. Kidd gave us a lot of information this morning. This is a very important topic, but it's not going to be our focus today. I want to talk more broadly about ACA and our history and our vision, as well as what we're thinking of as we lead into General Synod in 2019. However, we have many excellent resources on our website, and I encourage you to check those out. So what I want to do today is share a bit of history and vision, talk to you about what ACA is doing now in terms of our strategy, and then we'll have a bit of Q&A as time allows, and some focused prayer at the end of that. So a brief history of Anglican Communion Alliance. In 1994, after there had been growing concerns about our church and what some might call a kind of theological drift, at that time the Montreal Declaration was adopted at a national conference of 600 Anglicans from across Canada. I'm curious, Jean, were you there? Was anyone there in 94 when the Montreal Declaration was drafted? There we are. Thank you. Okay. So that document would serve as the theological basis for the Essentials Council. Many of you remember Anglican Essentials. That was a coalition of the Prayer Book Society, Anglican Renewal Ministries, and Barnabas Ministries. Some of you might remember the name Roger Spack, who serves faithfully on our ACA board. He's quite a historian, and he puts it this way when telling me about the history of all this. He said simply, these organizations and essentials were put in place to plan how to get the church back to the Bible. And then a series of events took place that kind of accelerated things and led to where we are today, most prominently around the issue of same-sex relationships. And let me say again, that is a symptom of our deeper issues, right? So we are going to talk a fair bit about that today, because I am going to focus somewhat on the sort of political aspects of what's going on and so on, because I think that's good information for you to have. But as ACA, we are focused on a much deeper thing, and our motto is deepening biblical faith in the Anglican Church of Canada. So then in 2002, Diocese of New Westminster approved same-sex blessings. And in 2004, General Synod meeting in St. Catherine's declares the integrity and sanctity of same-sex relationships. So no, we're still talking only about blessings, not about marriage. In 2005, Anglican Essentials sort of divides into two parts, with a partnership between the Anglican Network and Anglican Federation. Anglican Essentials Federation. So as you know, the network eventually formed its own church body. Federation were those who disagreed with the direction of the church, but wanted to remain within the church, sort of like loyal dissenters. And we still use that phrase today, loyal dissenters. So that name Federation lasted until 2008, when Brett Kane took charge, Roger tells me, through a gathering at Wycliffe College, changed the name and got some enthusiasm going. ACA was then led by Murray Henderson and later Dr. Rosetta Kidd, Ron's wife, as I mentioned. Now, our current chair is Dr. David Smith, who's also in the Diocese of Ontario, as am I. He wasn't able to join us here this weekend, but he and his family are close friends of my family's, and my husband and he both serve in Saskatchewan, as well as his wife. He's a brilliant man, and I'm sure you've appreciated his reflections in our newsletters and on our cross-country calls. But back to history. Basically, ACA really is the continuation of Essentials, of what Essentials set out to do. So it's the continuation within the Anglican Church of Canada of those goals. In 2007, General Synod meeting in Winnipeg says that same-sex blessings are not in conflict with the core doctrine of the Church. And in that same year, the Anglican Network in Canada begins offering alternate episcopal oversight to disaffected clergy and congregations under the leadership of Bishop John Harvey. 2008 sees the formation of GAFCON in Jerusalem, an international fellowship of confessing Orthodox Anglicans. 2010, General Synod meeting in Halifax decides not to decide and to continue living together in this tension. And then after a bit of a pause, things shift again. In 2013, I don't know if you can see that, you don't need to read it all, but it's there for you. In 2013 meeting in Ottawa, General Synod passes a motion asking that a resolution be prepared to amend the marriage canon, allowing for the marriage of same-sex couples. So now we are, rather suddenly, in a way, talking about authorizing same-sex marriage, not just blessings. In an amendment to that motion, it was stipulated that there must also be a theological rationale for doing this, and that there should be a conscience clause to protect those who might disagree. It was also determined that in order to pass this resolution, since it was considered a doctrinal change, would require a 2/3 majority in each of 3 houses, bishops, clergy, and laity, and 2 successive synods. And then General Synod 2016 in Richmond Hill, so that was the first of those potential 2 successive synods, the resolution came to the floor to this effect. It included a conscience clause originally and pointed to the development of this holy estate, which was a document produced by a committee, pointed to that as the theological rationale that had been produced between those two synods. And we'll talk more about that document later. During the sessions on the floor, Archbishop Colin Johnson of Toronto suggested that instead of the conscience clause, the resolution be amended to take an opt-in approach, and this was accepted. So the new wording stipulates, near the end there, a minister may only solemnize a marriage between persons of the same sex if authorized by the diocesan bishop. So now there's no conscience clause per se, but this statement. The rationale, I believe the Archbishop wanted to retain the authority of bishops over their own dioceses, which has a logic to it, certainly, in an episcopal structure. He was, I believe, also relying on the Chancellor's assurances that a conscience clause per se was not really needed, as the Charter protects religious freedom, and the current canon, as it stands, makes clear that a cleric can refuse to perform any particular marriage. More on that later as well. But whatever the rationale, this is quite plainly a situation in which an Orthodox bishop at least does have some control over what happens in his or her diocese, but in which an Orthodox priest, under a bishop in favor of same-sex marriage, has no formal protection within the resolution. So that's where things stood in July of 2016. And as many of you might remember, the vote was first thought to have gone against, and then it was discovered that through some technical issues, votes in favor of the change had been missed or misclassified, and the resolution was indeed approved by a 2/3 majority in all three houses. But during that in-between time, in the interim when General Synod thought the vote had been defeated, several bishops announced they would proceed anyway with allowing for same-sex marriage in their dioceses, providing what they considered pastoral provision with varying approaches, some saying it would only be on a case-by-case basis or whatever. They were, no doubt, emboldened in that by the Chancellor's comments in what has been called an argument from silence, that the current canon doesn't actually prohibit same-sex marriage. So where we are at now. Following General Synod 2016 and the restructuring of ACA to include a national director, which is a part-time paid position held by me, we are building from the grassroots up. We have an excellent board. You can see their lovely faces here. That's us meeting in Brighton, Ontario in 2017. We have ACA chapters in several dioceses, in the Diocese of Ontario, in Niagara, and in Toronto. We're also close to, hopefully we're going to be able to start one in the Diocese of Rupert's Land. There's some interest there. And we have a group that is meeting informally in the province of BC and Yukon across several dioceses. And they meet entirely by Zoom and video conference. And so far I've been joining in on those. I may not, in the long term, or I may. So my point here is the chapter can take many different forms, whatever works for a particular area. It's something we really encourage. It's very flexible, and it's just a source of fellowship and support. We are also looking at other ways to get people connected. There are places where there is not and may not be a chapter for whatever reason. Sometimes there might be only 1 or 2 people in a large area that have interest. So it was requested that we also create a way for individuals to partner with us. So we have done that through our ACA Partners Plan. And I will talk about that a bit later as well. And I'm going to invite you to participate and to sign to become a partner. You can do it online or on paper right here during this session if you'd like to. I will also mention that in appointing a national director, the ACA board was really taking a step of faith, since the funding for the future was anything but secure. But we really are in a building mode with our new website, a growing presence on Facebook, new chapters beginning to pop up, and various strategies we are developing as we move towards General Synod 2019. Dr. Smith, our chair, and I feel very strongly that ACA is and needs to be a grassroots movement. I want to be extremely responsive to you, to Anglicans across the country. We make a real point of listening to Anglicans. I'm able to do this, of course, through social media and emails and phone calls, but we also do it through the cross-country calls that happen every month, as well as my participation in local chapters and house meetings when invited. Someone at lunch said to me, "Are you going to do more of these conferences?" And I said, "I'll go anywhere where I'm invited." So, invite. So, we want to do more. as you know, travel is expensive, but we want to do as much as we can to reach out across the country, and I want to listen to your concerns. So I can't emphasize enough that our strategies around General Synod and the need for formal provisions and protections, which I'll talk about shortly, these are being shaped by, in particular, what clergy are telling me about their sense of vulnerability in this church. I'm also in very regular contact with the Gracious Restraint / Community Partners bishops, and I'm very pleased also to say we have a lawyer on our ACA board who is very knowledgeable in canon law. So you can imagine that I am certainly not a lawyer, not really an expert in anything in particular, so it's very, very helpful for me to have these people to talk to. So I'm constantly drawing on this expertise and listening to Anglicans across the country, and I would love to hear more from you. One thing I know about quite well is the feeling of isolation that many people struggle with. Perhaps, you know, especially in rural areas. If you are feeling isolated, get in touch with us. I may know someone that I can connect you with, or I'm happy to talk to people anytime about their concerns. We want to do lots more of them. So our thoughts and strategies around General Synod 2019 in terms of defeating this motion. Our first goal, let me be entirely clear, is to defeat this very divisive and unbiblical resolution. And I would add, no one should assume that it will in fact pass, even on its own, even without any particular effort on our part. The House of Bishops is of course shifting all the time, and they're certainly hopeful on that front. Back to the resolution that will be before us at General Synod. Sometimes it's good to go actually, we talk so much about the resolution and the marriage canon, and it's good to actually go and read the wording. Its first section, take a look at this, and this will remind you a lot of what Dr. Kidd was talking about, I think, can help. Boldly proposes that we declare that Canon 21 applies to all persons who are duly qualified by civil law to enter into marriage. Now, can anyone, even anyone who favors same-sex marriage, deny that it may be problematic to tie our church so tightly to what our government may decide in the future? I would suggest that the fact that the resolution was even crafted in this way shows that our church is not sufficiently in touch with where things are going in our culture. And this is not just a theoretical concern. In Ontario, there are already calls for legal provisions to be made for polyamorous relationships and families. The Liberal government of Ontario several years ago, the former government, having already opened the door to this with the November 2017 Bill 28, the All Families Are Equal Act. Then just a few months ago, a Newfoundland judge ruled that all three parents in a polyamorous family are the legal parents to the child. These rulings, my analysis anyway, seem to shift the definition of family away from more of a simple recognition of the traditional presumption of parenthood into the legal realm, subject to personal choice of partners. It can hardly be denied any longer that these kinds of relationships are gaining cultural approval. And I could go on with that, but I will not. I think you see what I'm saying. How will our church respond to these shifts in the culture? If we are to accept that marriage is definable by us, and that it should be shaped to accommodate erotic desire, then what will be down the road? Especially as we consider our response to those who experience themselves as gender fluid or bisexual. Recently in the Diocese of Ontario, we were asked to study this holy estate. This is the document I mentioned earlier. Looking more deeply into the treatment of scripture found in this holy estate, the type of argumentation used in that document is, to me, distressingly compatible with further and future expansions of marriage. And if this sounds kind of alarmist, maybe I'm a little given to that, I don't know, but I can tell you there are prominent voices in the Episcopal Church, maybe not a whole lot of them, but there are some, suggesting that the church should now be considering polyamory and other kinds of relationships. So this troubling fact will remain even if the resolution is amended at General Synod in 2019. And it may be, that wording in the opening will be changed. But the fact that it's even there in the first place should bring some alarm bells for us. And so ACA has resources on our website that directly address the many problems with this holy estate, including, there's several things there at the bottom. Oh, it doesn't quite show, it doesn't matter. A very strong piece by Joey Royal in the Diocese of the Arctic on how, from his perspective, this issue and this question affects our church's relationship with the Indigenous people of his diocese, the Arctic. There's some other very fine things there. Evaluating this holy state is a whole series of essays from academics looking at it. They didn't have the document itself. This holy state call for responses. Concerns about this holy state was written by Dr. Jacob Ellens, a very brilliant man in my own parish. So there's lots of things there. That Dr. Wright, that N.T. Wright thing on the left, I find very helpful when you're trying to explain, perhaps to a fellow believer, why this isn't just about this one thing, but how it's the whole arc of scripture that we need to look at when we're considering these relationships and when we're considering sexuality. Something very good from Reverend Sam Albury there as well. So we are going to be doing our very best to contact every General Synod delegate to share with them our concerns and to offer a biblical perspective on marriage. As far as General Synod goes, we're also working very hard to plan for a booth as well as a hospitality suite. This is expensive, especially in Vancouver. So please let me know if any of you own a downtown Vancouver hotel. That would be very interesting. But seriously, we are nearly settled on a location very near the main meeting, and we'll finalize that this fall. But if you feel called to do so, we would greatly appreciate any financial support for those efforts. Our hospitality suite is essential as a kind of base of operations for strategy, debriefing, and most importantly for prayer. Some of you were there last year, I know Sheila was there, or not last year, 2016. Our booth is the main point of communication with General Synod delegates as they walk past. That also is an expensive thing to book and to supply. So looking now at formal provisions, in addition to efforts to defeat the resolution itself, we are advocating for formal provisions and protections. These, we hope, will provide some measure of protection should the resolution be passed. So we want it to be defeated, but in the case of it passing, we need to have some protections embedded within. I do not accept the Chancellor's assurances that we have nothing to be concerned about. And we are very pleased that the Primate has indicated last spring that he has truly been listening to the concerns of Orthodox Anglicans and understands that there may be a need for formal provisions. This has no doubt largely affected the excellent work of the gracious restraint bishops who have, in a spirit of collegiality and charity, worked with their fellow bishops to communicate these concerns. And as Bishop Michael Hawkins mentioned, sometimes this work has been a bit quieter or behind the scenes, but it has been absolutely crucial in laying this groundwork as we move into this later stage. Of course, we know the ground is shifting culturally in Canada, and no one should believe themselves to be immune to human rights complaints or civil suits. I'll just mention that while the Chancellor has assured the Church that, according to the current canon, any clergy person can decline to perform a marriage, I think it is quite a different thing to decline to perform a marriage based on what is understood to be a matter of a person's core identity. I think we can all see that this kind of refusal might in the near future be seen as akin to declining to perform a marriage based on someone's racial background. We might not agree with that understanding of identity, but that's kind of the understanding that's out there in the culture. In general, there's at least some protection in this regard if you can point to your choices to decline as being a result of a genuine religious conviction, hopefully one that is shared by your religious community, not just a personal matter of conscience. However, another very serious concern, aside from these individual human rights complaints, concerns, and that sort of thing, is around the question of the oaths and subscriptions that a potential ordinand or bishop-elect or someone transferring to another diocese needs to make, in which they promise to assent to the doctrine of the Anglican Church of Canada and not to hold or teach anything contrary to it. So our concern here is about marginalization within the Church. Many of us here probably remember the sad story around Jake Worley and the series of events that led to his being blocked as Bishop of Caledonia and eventually fired as priest. The objection used to block him was Canon 4b6 of the provincial canons of BC and Yukon. It's very important to remember here that in this situation, he was not blocked based on anything he actually did. Now, he had planted an ACA, or I forget which body it was, but one of the alternate Anglican bodies, AMI, at that time, did a mission church plant in the United States. But what they actually brought up against him was not that he had done that, but on his view about what he had done. Because he would not say, I wish I hadn't done it, it was the wrong thing to do, and so on. And you can read online interviews that I did with him and so on why he was not able, why he would not go that far and say that. But the point is here for our discussion, even if a conscience clause, so stick with me here on this, even if a conscience clause that maybe would say no one would be forced to perform same-sex marriages, even if that were included in the resolution, that might not help postulates or those newly elected to the office of bishop. If they speak against the idea of the church performing same-sex marriage, they are they not, then holding a view contrary to the doctrine of the Anglican Church of Canada. Now, we can get into the weeds on this, and some people say, well, the doctrine doesn't actually change until you change the prayer book and so on. And we're having all those discussions to try to sort that out. But I think it's important to remember that if you hold a view contrary to the doctrine of the Anglican Church of Canada, well, you know what happened with Jake Worley. So we need protection against the accusation of holding and teaching something contrary to the church. If we don't have that, it won't only be those who refuse to perform a particular marriage that find themselves in trouble. We want then instead an amendment that recognizes the traditional position as a valid stream within the church. This is a stronger position, we believe. Remember I said that with the challenges of the human rights commissions and so on, that it's good if you can point to this being a valid religious conviction, especially one held by your religious community. So that can be helpful in terms of withstanding legal challenges from outside the church, but also as challenges arise within it, such as the one we were just discussing. So in our Q&A in a few minutes, I'm hoping to hear feedback from you on this question. What would it take for you to be able to make oaths and subscriptions should the canon be changed in 2019? So let me be clear, ACA is a grassroots movement, and I want to serve you and to learn from you. So this Q&A, that we'll have a little discussion, you might have a few questions for me. I may or may not have any answers for you, but I want to hear from you how you see this. So I'm inviting you to communicate with us. We'll talk in a minute, but the other ways to communicate with us are to like us on Facebook, some discussion that can happen there, to join us on our monthly cross-country calls. Those are a great way to connect with other like-minded people and gain information and encouragement. Just speak to me after or email me at Anglican Communion Alliance @gmail.com. I'm sure that address is on lots of our materials, so you can find it, to sign up to be notified of those calls. So in conclusion, Anglican Communion Alliance is not all about General Synod, nor is it all about same-sex marriage, nor is it all about defeating the resolution to amend the marriage canon. As I keep repeating, we want to continue, whatever happens to General Synod in 2019, ACA will continue in its call of deepening biblical faith in the Anglican Church of Canada. But as far as General Synod goes, the fact is we all know things can shift substantially even up to the time and after the vote itself. It could happen that even if we were to get some great amendments in the resolution, and then the resolution is defeated, that a new resolution would come forward that might trouble us in similar ways. On another note, it might be that some kind of alternative structure will eventually arise within the church. We really don't know. We know that our Indigenous brothers and sisters are looking at some kind of confederacy model in which people would belong sort of to two streams, both to the Indigenous church, but also to the Anglican Church of Canada. Might this be some kind of helpful analogy or template for us moving forward? This is something we're thinking about and discussing. So for all of this work to happen, we need you to partner with us. We want to speak for you in the councils of the church at the national level and in providing resources to parishes and individuals. So you may decide to form a chapter in this diocese or any diocese that's represented here. But as I mentioned, some need it, some would like to partner with us individually, and we actually encourage everyone to do that. Whether you've been involved with ACA before or whatever, if you have not done this, we invite you to do it. I actually have forms here that you can sign, or you can do this online at www.anglicancommunionalliance.ca. And of course, I forgot to bring them up, so I'm just going to get these forms. I wonder if I could get someone to just help me hand these out. I think that's all that's in there. Make sure there's nothing else. No, there's a few other things in there.
What do you need?
Good, that's it. Okay. So what you'll receive is a form, it's 2 stapled sheets. Make sure you get the right thing. And you'll be invited to sign those. If you want to do it online, you go to our website there, and you'll click on the contact button at the top, scroll to the bottom, and click on Become an ACA Partner. So if anyone wants to get up their phone and look at that, you can, if you have data, I guess. And then you just kind of scroll to the bottom, there's a little video by me, which you don't need to watch because it's on today. But you can click on Become an ACA Partner, fill out that form. Basically, in signing that form, you're saying that you support the Montreal Declaration. I didn't print it out for you here today, but it is online, so you can review that. So by signing that, you're saying that you support ACA and can endorse the principles of the Montreal Declaration. You do not have to support us financially to partner with us. You'll be invited to sign up for pre-authorized giving. That just gives us a more reliable means of moving forward, but we do not want there to be any financial barrier. All right, thank you. So I'd like you to take a look at those when you have a few minutes this afternoon. Hand them back to me or put them on this front pew if you do go ahead and fill them out. Otherwise, feel free to go online later and fill them out that way. So just before we move into the Q&A, I just want to mention a conversation that I had recently with someone who has been working within her diocese to stand up for what she believes, for the truth, and for a fair process as her diocese grapples with their response to this resolution. She feels that her efforts are circumvented by various forces within her diocese. She feels at times angry and despairing, and I can understand all of these feelings, for sure. But I sometimes, here's what I shared with her. I sometimes look ahead a bit and picture myself sitting there in Vancouver at General Synod in the moments after the big vote at General Synod 2019. How will I feel? How will I feel if the worst happens, which would be both that the resolution passes and that it contains no serious formal provisions? Of course, I will be disappointed and maybe frustrated, but I will not feel that I, or you, or the Anglican Communion Alliance has failed. I believe that as long as we are faithful and we work hard to do what God has called us to do, we are successful in the eyes of our Lord. Success is faithfulness. We are not called primarily to win a political battle, but to stand for the truth and to stand together. And I have a real sense of peace about that. It's a kind of a strange kind of peace because it actually makes me work harder, not stay in bed, but get up and do stuff. So it's a good kind of peace. And it doesn't make me care about the issues any less, but I believe that we are called to, above all, speak the truth in love. Whether the resolution passes or not, let it be said about us by those who are willing to see that we are firm in our convictions, but also that the love of Jesus shines through us in everything we do and say. Thank you. So I'm going to, at this point, turn off the live stream and maybe have a stretch and fill out the form if you'd like, and then we'll come back for a Q&A followed by a time of prayer. So the live stream will be off during the Q&A just to allow a little bit more freedom and safety. Just comments people might want to. So thank you very much, and see you in a minute.